In this video, I am going to determine every single driver on the 2025 F1 grid's best season. And then, since this is a YouTube video, we are going to rank them tier list style. Woohoo! The tiers in this video are going to be GOAT, Pretty Elite, Good, Not Bad, and Is That It? Which, coincidentally, no female has ever asked me. We're going to go in order from least seasons completed to most seasons completed, which means that we're starting with the 5 rookies. And obviously, none of them have completed any seasons in F1, so they're not making it into this video. Though I guess technically Ollie Behrman did complete 3 races last year, so does that mean he makes it in? We'll put him in. Oh, and Jack Doohan completed 1 race in Abu Dhabi last year, so he can join Ollie down in Is That It? Okay, now on to the actual drivers that have sort of completed seasons at least, with Liam Lawson up first, who sort of completed 2023 and 2024, 5 races in 23, 6 races in 24, and it's a toss-up between the two as to which was a better season for him. Personally, I think that his 2023 performance was more impressive than his 2024. If you look at the stats, which I'm quite a nerd, I like to do that, he scored 2 points across his 5 races in 2023, whilst Yuki Tsunoda scored 0 across those 5 races. And in 2024, he scored 4 points across 6 races, in which Yuki Tsunoda scored 8. So outscoring Yuki 2-0 versus underscoring him 4-8, I think means that 2023 was more impressive. The other big factor here is that, of course, the circumstances in which Liam entered the sport in 2023 are a bit more complex, a bit more difficult to deal with, I'd imagine, as a driver. In 2023, he was called up last minute because Daniel Ricciardo had a crash and he broke his hand. So there was not much preparation time, he came flying straight into the sport, and he performed pretty admirably as soon as he stepped into the car. 2024, on the other hand, you'd imagine he probably had a bit more time to prepare himself, to get himself sorted for that seat, because it was kind of obvious for a while that Daniel Ricciardo was going to be stepping out of the car for the latter part of the season. So I'm going to say that 2023 Liam Lawson was more impressive than 2024 Liam Lawson. However, he's still going to go down in the bottom tier of Is That It? Because when you look at the context of all the drivers' best seasons on the grid right now, we're going to be having some World Championship winning seasons later on in this video. So it's going to have to unfortunately be bottom tier for Liam Lawson. Moving into another driver who has only completed the last 2 seasons in Oscar Piastri. However, for him, he completed all of 2023 and 2024. And this is quite an easy one for me. I think it's very fair to say that Oscar has developed massively from 2023 into 2024. And last season, of course, he picked up his first 2 race wins in Formula 1. It was a very solid season overall. But Oscar isn't quite the complete package yet. Whilst that 2024 season was very impressive, you'd be expecting him to develop further into 2025, and a lot of people are predicting him to have an absolutely unbelievable season. I've seen many people saying that he's going to be up for the title this year. Me personally, I can't really see him having a better season than Lando Norris. Maybe that's just me. But for his 2024 season at least, I'm going to put that in the good tier. The race wins really do bring him up here. And I do think that it was a solid season, especially when you consider the fact that he's only been in the sport for 2 seasons. Next, we move on to Yuki Tsunoda, who has 4 seasons to choose from, 2021 through to 2024. But another one that I would say is a fairly easy choice. Yuki has only really gotten better since coming into Formula 1. 2021, he got absolutely dunked on by Pierre Gasly, so it's obviously not going to be that. 2022, the AlphaTauri regressed a little bit, and he got a little bit closer to Pierre Gasly in that season. And then 2023 and 2024 is really when we've seen the best of Yuki Tsunoda. He essentially destroyed Nick de Vries's career in 2023, and in 2024, he retired Daniel Ricciardo. And so I think that overall, Yuki's 2024 was really solid, and I think that he's in a good position to continue that form into 2025. Obviously, the state of his seat in Formula 1 is a little bit up in the air right now, with him probably going to be leaving Racing Bulls at the end of this season, so it'll be really interesting to see where he goes for the regulation change in 2026. But 2024 Yuki Tsunoda, it's a good season for him, but I wouldn't say that it's necessarily good in the context of every driver's best season, so I'm going to put it into the not bad tier for this one. Now we move on to Alex Albon, who's been in the sport since 2019. However, he did obviously have that year out in 2021 after his disastrous spell at Red Bull. If you were to look at points total and just determine which season was best for Alex, then you would say his 2020 season is his best. He scored 105 points over the course of the season, but that is far from the truth, because in that season he was outperformed dramatically, as you'd expect, by Max Verstappen, but overall it was quite an uninspiring time, and he was one of those drivers who fell culprit to that awful second seat at Red Bull. However, after that season, he took that year out. He went to DTM, he had an alright experience there, and then he came back to the Williams seat in 2022, came back with vengeance to get a total of 4 points that season. But it was really in 2023 that Alex Albon shone. I think throughout that season, he obviously didn't have much of a teammate marker to go up against. Unfortunately, Goat Tiffy wasn't really providing much challenge for him. He scored 27 points over the course of the season, including highlights of P7 finishes in Canada and in Monza, and it was just the best representation of Alex Albon that we've seen so far. I think his 2024 season was a little bit crashy, especially towards the end. It did seem like that Williams was difficult to drive based on what happened with Colapinto as well. But 2023 Alex Albon, definitely the best season we've seen from him so far. And of course, as we all know, he's got the big challenge coming in of Carlos Sainz this season. Whether or not he can really stack up against a driver like Carlos Sainz, we don't really know yet, but it would be really impressive if he does manage it, and would probably be his best season to date. His 2023 season, I'm going to put in the not bad category. We now move to George Russell, who also joined the sport in 2019 like Alex Albon. However, he did not have a season out, but what he did have was a very tumultuous time to start his F1 career at a Williams team that struggled to score any points in the first 2 seasons that he was there. However, it was really in 2021 that we started to see George Russell excel and become the driver that we know him to be today. In that season, he qualified incredibly strongly, P2 in Belgium, P3 in Russia, and arguably up there as one of his better seasons. Of course, it earned him that drive at Mercedes. The team couldn't put off promoting him for any longer. And in 2022, I believe we saw the best season of George Russell. It's a toss-up really between 2022 and 2024. Both seasons, he outscored Lewis Hamilton over the course of the full season, but I'd say that 2022 is more impressive to me based on the fact that it was his first season in the team. Of course, 2024, incredibly impressive. The way that he performed throughout the season, his points total at the end, it really does sum up the fact that George Russell is a very competent driver in Formula One. But the fact that in his first season at the team, he outscored Lewis and got his first ever race win at that Brazilian Grand Prix, it was a really, really solid year. I think that George has really proved, across those 2 seasons at least, that if Mercedes were to give him a championship winning car, he's got the pedigree of a driver that is going to be able to win a world championship. And so that's why I'm going to put George Russell's 2022 season into the pretty elite tier. Moving to Lando Norris now, the final driver that joined the grid in 2019. Absolutely crazy to consider that those drivers have all been in the sport since then, and we've got 6 seasons to consider for Lando Norris. Of course, McLaren, when he joined the team, were not that great. They then went up to sort of podium contenders. Then at the start of 2023 came back to being really at the back of the grid, horrible performance at the start of that year, to now having the best car on the grid. And you'd assume for 2025 that is going to be the way that it continues. Lando's career overall has been very impressive, I would say. And I think because of the mistakes that he made last season, people underrate him right now. I think that Lando, if you look back over especially 2021, 2022, 2023, but I do I do still think that 2024 was Lando's best season, despite the fact that he did make the mistakes. He also did get his first race wins in the sport. He demonstrated pace that was absolutely electrifying, unbeatable on these weekends. And so I think that 2024 still was the best season from Lando. And this 2024 season from Lando Norris, in my opinion, puts him into the pretty elite category alongside George Russell. But for me, Lando's 2024 more impressive than George Russell's 2022. But let me know how you guys feel about that in the comments. Charles Leclerc has been in Formula One now since 2018, and his first season in the sport at Sauber was enough for him to immediately get promoted to the Ferrari team alongside Sebastian Vettel for that season. And I believe that that 2019 season was his best that we've seen so far. He demonstrated electrifying pace throughout the season. He beat Sebastian Vettel over the course of the year in his first season at the Scuderia, won his first races by battling off a prime Lewis Hamilton in both Monza and in Belgium. I think that 2019 was the best Charles Leclerc that we have seen. Obviously, there's two big rival seasons to the 2019 season that Charles had, and those are 2022, where he had his only real opportunity to go for a title fight, but a mix of Ferrari strategy and also Charles being incredibly crash happy in the first half of the season kind of diminished any sort of chances of that becoming a title, and of course the imperious Max Verstappen went on to win it. And then in 2024, I think that we saw the most consistent Charles Leclerc over the course of the season. I think that Charles last season was incredibly strong. The only reason that I'm going to rate it underneath his 2019 season is just because of the way that it was so explosive in 2019. Charles came into that team and just immediately made it his own and immediately proved that he was going to be one of the talents of the future. I do think that 2025 is set up for Charles Leclerc to definitely go for a title push. I'm hoping we see it because it's going to be absolutely beautiful to watch. But for me, it's going to be 2019 that takes it for Charles Leclerc. And for me, that has to be a pretty elite season. It's going to go above Lando Norris's 2024. I actually thought that Charles Leclerc's 2024 was also better than Lando Norris's 2024. So it has to be above Lando Norris. It's not quite in the GOAT status because, you know, that's going to be reserved for later on drivers. But yeah, pretty elite 2019 for Charles Leclerc. We now move on to Pierre Gasly, who has had an incredibly up and down career to this point. Starting off in 2017, he came in at the end of the season, and then in 2018, he showed the makings of what was a very young, promising driver at Toro Rosso. Before Daniel Ricciardo made the shock decision to leave the Red Bull team to go to Renault, there was a seat available there, and I think it's fair to say that Gasly was promoted a little too early for his development as a driver. He stepped into the car in 2019, and as we all know, he was dropped by mid-season in favour of Alex Albon. But in a way, that was almost the making of Pierre Gasly, because the seasons that followed were absolutely sublime. In 2020, he got his first ever race win, and then in 2021, I think we saw the best of Pierre Gasly. His consistency throughout the season in a car that was clearly not as good as he was driving it. He was mixing it up with the McLarens and the Ferraris on essentially a racely basis. He was absolutely unreal in qualifying that season, and overall just proved that he just needed a little bit more time before stepping into Red Bull. Obviously, since then, he continued at that team for another season, but it was quite clear that Red Bull weren't considering promoting him back to the main team, and they were clearly wanting to keep Sergio Perez on. So he made the bold decision to leave the Red Bull family, go to Alpine. In 2023, I wouldn't say he regressed as a driver per se, but he definitely had a little bit of an adjustment period before in 2024, I think we really started to see the best of Pierre Gasly once again. Towards the end of the season particularly, he was really strong, and it sets him up to have what I believe is going to be his best season yet in 2025. Why did I struggle with 2025? Pierre's 2021 season for me goes into the good category. I might be slightly overrating him. I do have a bit of a personal bias towards Pierre. I think particularly because of the hardship that he went through and then his resurgence in 2020, it just really made me fall in love with him as a driver. So yeah, might be a bit biased, but Pierre Gasly goes into good. We now move to Esteban Ocon, who has had a really strange career overall, and one that's been full of incredibly strong teammates. After switching from a stricken Manor team in 2016 to Force India in 2017, he was up against what at the time was a prime midfield Sergio Perez. He then made the switch to Renault in 2019, up against a prime Daniel Ricciardo. And then when 2021 rolled around, it was none other than Fernando Alonso stepping into the seat alongside him. And then more laterally, who we just spoke about, Pierre Gasly, has been up against him in the last 2 seasons. And I think in a way, Esteban's career has kind of been tarnished a little bit by him being up against such strong teammates with such passionate fan bases, especially with the way that Esteban drives around his teammates. We've seen it throughout the years. We saw it basically since the start of his Force India career, that he is not afraid to go toe-to-toe with any teammate that he has. Goes over the line a little bit, it is fair to say, and I think for that reason, he's quite underrated as a driver overall. I think for me, the 2 main seasons that come to mind when I think of Esteban Ocon's best seasons are his 2017 performance in Force India and his 2022 season at Alpine. In 2017, his first season at a bigger team than Manor, he was up against Sergio Perez, who was in the prime of his career. I can't understate this enough. Sergio Perez at this stage was not the Sergio Perez that we know from Red Bull. He was really, really strong, and Esteban managed to finish within only 13 points of him at the end of the season. They were both 8th and 9th in the championship respectively, and Esteban took it to Sergio over the course of the season and was incredibly strong. However, 2022 for me is the strongest Esteban Ocon that we have seen. Up against Fernando Alonso, who at this point had been back in the sport for a full season, embedded in that Alpine team, and Esteban managed to outscore Fernando Alonso over the course of the season. And I know that Fernando Alonso season is seen as very unlucky by a lot of Alonso fans, and I'm not discrediting that by any means, but what I would say is that Esteban still managed to outscore him over the course of the season, and the numbers don't lie. I think Esteban's career since then hasn't quite hit those highs. 2023 was an okay season. 2024, again an okay season, but he was dropped pretty early, which must have affected his confidence a decent amount. He's got this big move to Haas now, and I really hope that he manages to use it to re-energize his career and really show what he's made of as a driver, because I do think that there is some really good raw pace in there. In terms of the tier list itself, I'm going to go for the not bad tier for Esteban Ocon, just below Alex Albon's 2023. I think that Esteban Ocon still leaves more to show on the table in his F1 career. And now we move to another driver who has completed 8 seasons in Formula 1. It is none other than Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll came into Formula 1 as an incredibly young driver. And to be honest, in his rookie season in 2017, he really cemented himself as an impressive young talent. He got his first podium in his opening season in Baku. He managed to qualify in P3 for the race in Monza in a really dismal, wet qualifying day. I know he was helped out by the Red Bulls having penalties on that day, but it was still a really impressive performance. And yes, he did make mistakes in 2017, but they were kind of understandable rookie errors. The issue for Lance Stroll, and the reason that many people don't think that he deserves a shot in F1 anymore, me included, is the fact that he still makes those mistakes now. And we are 8 seasons into his Formula 1 career. That is just not quite acceptable at this point. And I honestly do think that Lance Stroll's rookie season in 2017 is probably the best season that we will see from him. There is an argument that his 2020 season was a little bit better, and up until the midway point in that season, he was actually sitting in 4th in the championship. He then had a suspension failure at the Mugello Grand Prix, and it just really didn't seem like he was able to re-harness that form for the rest of the season. He ended up dropping down to P11 in the championship that year, and his points gap between him and his teammate Sergio Perez that season, that just kind of puts it down in my estimations, and that's why I'm going for 2017 over the 2020 season for Lance. And unfortunately, I am going to rank Lance Stroll's 2017 performance in the Is That It category, mostly because there aren't many Lance Stroll fans, and so they won't come at me for putting him down there. We now move on to Carlos Sainz, who has been a mainstay in Formula One for a very long time now. Can you believe that he is the 4th oldest driver on the grid? That is absolutely mental to me. His time in Formula One started off fairly tough. He was up against Max Verstappen, one of the most hotly anticipated rookies of all time, perhaps. He was at the Toro Rosso team up until the end of 2017 when he decided to make the switch to Renault. And then after one full season at Renault in 2018, Daniel Ricciardo decided that he wanted to drive there. And so Carlos Sainz made the move to McLaren. And what a move it was. Before Carlos Sainz joined McLaren in that 2018 season, the highest position of a driver for that team was P11 in the Drivers' Championship. However, in 2019, Carlos Sainz finally showed what he was made of. Not that his seasons before were particularly horrendous or anything, but 2019 was a real turn of the page for Carlos Sainz. He managed to secure P6 in the Drivers' Championship, was on 95 points up against Lando Norris as his teammate, who only scored 49 throughout the season. Of course, Lando Norris was a rookie this season, but we know the driver that he has become now, and that is what makes Carlos Sainz's season so impressive. If we remember back to that 2019 season, there's obviously two big memories that stick in my brain at least. We've got his amazing P3 finish in Brazil that we didn't actually see him on the podium for because Lewis Hamilton got a penalty after the race that promoted Carlos Sainz onto the podium. But still, his first podium in Formula One. And then of course at the final race of the season, the move that he made to cement himself in P6 in the championship, and of course that team radio that followed, one of my favourite moments in F1. I wouldn't say necessarily that Carlos Sainz peaked in 2019 and got progressively worse since then or anything. To be honest, his 2020 season also very strong. 2021, after he made that big switch to Ferrari, he actually outscored Charles Leclerc over that season, and he has been an incredibly strong driver since then. But for me, that McLaren season really stands out. But let me know how you guys would rank them in the comments below. And as for how I would rank them in terms of the other drivers' best seasons, I'm going to put this 2019 Carlos Sainz performance into the pretty elite tier. I think that Carlos Sainz is a pretty elite driver, and so he deserves to be up there. We now move to Max Verstappen, who unbelievably has been in the sport for 10 seasons at this point. That's crazy to me. At such a young age, he has been really an elite driver for a long time now. And to be fair, when it comes to his best season, we've really got 4 seasons to choose from, which are his 4 championship winning seasons. That's not to discredit Max Verstappen as a driver before he won championships. His 2020 season was absolutely unreal and would probably put him at the top of the tier list right now. But when you've won 4 championships, it's going to be one of those ones. In 2021, we've of course got his fight with Lewis Hamilton. 2022, very dominant season. 2023, the most dominant season of all time. And then 2024, where he managed to win the championship with just pure consistency throughout the second half of the season when the Red Bull car wasn't the fastest. For me, it's a toss-up between 2021 and 2023 as to which is Max Verstappen's best seasons of his career. Obviously, 2021, going up against Lewis Hamilton in the prime of his career, the driver that has just won the last 4 world championships, the constructor that has just won the last 7 world championships, to come out on top at the end of that season, absolutely unreal performance from Max. However, for me, I think I'm going to have to give it to the 2023 season. Winning 20 races in a 23 race calendar is just unbelievable. Breaking basically every record that there possibly is to be had in Formula One. His performance over the course of the whole 2023 season is ridiculous. And I know that the Red Bull was really dominant that year, but for him to be that bulletproof in terms of consistency, it has to be the 2023 season for me. And of course, this is going into the GOAT category. If you're disagreeing with that, then I don't know what you're doing watching F1. Nico Hülkenberg next. And what a weird career he has had. Let me elaborate. Starts off at Williams and has a pretty solid rookie year. He even manages to get a pole position in Interlagos. Before then, he's just dropped from the team for the 2011 season in favour of none other than Pastor Maldonado, which is funny to look back on. He then re-enters the sport in 2012 at Force India, where he has, once again, a pretty solid season, before in Brazil, he leads the race for 30 whole laps before spinning out into Lewis Hamilton and ruining any chances of a podium. He then switches to Sauber for 2013, who had an absolutely rotten car, and that was not the right move for him at that point in his career, unfortunately. Before then, in 2014, he moves back to Force India and has 3 seasons there. His first season back at Force India, he outperformed Sergio Perez massively, 96 points to 59, a really solid display that year. 2015, he wins Le Mans, which is pretty crazy to do as an F1 driver. However, in the context of Formula 1, he was outperformed by Perez that year, and 2016 was the same. He then opted to move to the Renault team for 2017, and in my opinion, this is when we saw the best of Nico Hülkenberg in Formula 1. Not in the 2017 season itself, but in 2018. He had an absolutely unreal season. He finished best of the rest in the Drivers' Championship. He finished in P6 or better 6 times over the course of the season, and he was just absolutely unbelievably consistent over the season. And then in 2019, as we know, Daniel Ricciardo joined the team. He slipped down the pack a little bit in that season, and then he was dropped for the 2020 season. And other than some cameos for the pink Mercedes in 2020 and 1 cameo for Aston Martin in 2022, he wasn't on the grid for the next 3 seasons, before returning to Haas for 2023, and he's been pretty solid since then. And 2024 was a really solid season from Nico Hülkenberg. Perhaps his best. It's definitely between 2018 and 2024 for me. I'm going to give it to 2018, perhaps just nostalgia bias, definitely could be. But Nico Hülkenberg's 2018 season, that was absolutely peak for me. I don't know if you guys are interested in it, but Formula 1.5, that was just my jam in 2018. The Reddit page that just detailed every single result if it was to just be the top 3 teams not in the sport. Absolutely sublime content. And so Nico Hülkenberg 2018 for me. I'm going to put it into the good tier, just below Pierre Gasly. I don't think it's any better. Perhaps it's a little bit worse. But it's going in good because it looks symmetrical. Lewis Hamilton has been in the sport for an obscene number of seasons now. And in terms of his best season of all time, well, we've kind of got 7 drivers' championships to choose from here. And that's not to even discredit the fact that in his non-championship winning seasons, he had some really strong years. His rookie season, one to be definitely an honourable mention, him finishing 1 point off the championship in that rookie season. It's the best rookie season of all time, let's be honest with ourselves, and I honestly can't see it getting beaten anytime soon, unless Kimi Antonelli wants to go and win the championship this year. That would be pretty crazy. But yeah, unbelievable 2007 from Lewis Hamilton, but it's not going to be in the conversation for what is his best F1 season. It's a difficult one to choose because there are so many. For me, it comes down to 2014, 2017, and 2020. 2014, his first title at Mercedes. Of course, he had already won one with McLaren in 2008, but 2014, Lewis Hamilton was just absolutely dominant, took Nico Rosberg to the cleaners, and did a very good job. 2017, he was up against Sebastian Vettel for the championship, a Mercedes versus Ferrari battle throughout the season, and he was actually behind Sebastian Vettel at the midway point of the season, which is kind of hard to remember because I've just felt like Lewis and Mercedes were so dominant throughout that entire period, but Ferrari and Vettel gave it a very good go. in 2017. Lewis ended up coming out on top, had a really solid end to the season, but it's not going to be my best title for him. For me, it has to be that 7th title. The 2020 season is the most dominant Lewis Hamilton we have ever seen. I remember specifically in wet weather conditions that year, he was just absolutely unbelievable. I'm remembering like an Austria qualifying session where he was like a second faster than the rest of the pack. At that point in time, you switched on the TV to watch F1 and Lewis Hamilton won. And that had just been how it was for such a long time. Obviously, since then, it's been more of a Max Verstappen Formula 1. But at that stage, Lewis Hamilton was definitely the strongest driver in F1. 2020, definitely his strongest year, in my opinion. And of course, it has to go in the GOAT category. It can't go anywhere else. I am going to put it just below Max Verstappen's 2023. I think because of how dominant that season was, the 20 race wins, I can't discredit that in any way. So it's going to go 2nd place, but it's still in the GOAT category. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Fernando Alonso. 21 seasons in Formula 1, 2 drivers' titles, and a hell of a lot of missed opportunities. He's been incredibly unlucky over the course of his full career. However, it hasn't stopped him being really strong in Formula 1, and we've got so many seasons to choose from in terms of which are his best. In that aforementioned Hamilton rookie season in 2007, Fernando Alonso also completed that year on 109 points. 110 was the championship winning score. So he was 1 point off the championship that year. Definitely has to be in consideration. In 2023, he finished 4th in the championship at the ripe old age of 40 years old. He was really solid, especially in the first half of the season, picked up many podiums, looked like the only man that could really take it to Max Verstappen that year if the car was stronger, which it unfortunately wasn't. And he even said himself that he thought that that 2023 season was his strongest since the 2012 season, which was an absolutely unbelievable display from Fernando. He and Sebastian Vettel locked horns throughout the entirety of the 2012 season, and unfortunately he missed out on the title by just 3 points. Similarly, another season that we have to bring up is the 2010 season from Fernando Alonso, in which he finished P2 in the championship behind only Sebastian Vettel once again, this time only 4 points behind the eventual winner. And that 2010 season had 4 drivers mathematically capable of winning the championship going into the final race. Please let us have that in 2025. And then of course, I've not even mentioned his title winning seasons yet, 2005 and 2006. I personally believe the 2006 season to be better than his 2005 season because of the fact that he was fighting against Michael Schumacher for that championship, and Fernando managed to stave off a resurgent Ferrari that year and took the title. And in terms of his best season overall, for me it's between the 2006 championship and that 2012 season. It is going to be, weirdly, the 2012 season where he didn't win the championship. But when you look at that season overall, the drives that Fernando managed to achieve throughout the year, his race wins were truly sublime that year. And the fact that he finished 2nd in the championship, only 3 points behind Sebastian Vettel, who at the time was about to be in a 4-year run of championship wins. That was his 3rd on the bounce. And his teammate, Felipe Massa, was 156 points behind him in the championship in the same car. And Fernando was on 278, 3 points off the title, as I mentioned. That is just an unbelievable season. It's one that he says is one of his best seasons of all time, and I think it is. And of course, Alonso's 2012 season, it can go nowhere other than the GOAT tier. I'm going to put it just below Lewis Hamilton's 2020. I think that's fair. And that brings us to a conclusion in this video. As this next season draws ever closer, the hype becomes more and more real, and I cannot wait for this 2025 season with all of these drivers on the grid.